Usul al-fiqh, which, Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayyah is probably, arguably amongst the Sunni tradition, one of the greatest living usuli scholars, and recognized by the ulama as that, especially in the Maqasidi school. But usul al-fiqh, according to Imam al-Qushayri, he says all of the scholars have positions like a government. So he says, for instance, like the fuqaha are like the ministers. So the jurists are like the ministers of the government. He said the muhaddithun are like and the qurra, they're like the protectors of the treasury, because that's where the storehouses are. But he says the usulis are the generals of the army. Like they're the Greek word for general is strategos, which is where we get our word strategy from. So the usuli is looking always at the ma'alats. And that's why people often, they can't keep up with usuli scholars, because they're ahead. They're thinking, it's like chess and checkers. A master chess player, once that first move's made on his opponent, he's pretty much mapped out the whole game. So if you're playing chess and you do one or two moves ahead, a master chess player is 5 or 6 or 10 or 15, and sometimes even more if they get to the level of, the top people, Bobby Fischer type level. So that's what an usuli scholar, he's looking at the ma'alat, and it's hard for people to see that. And then you have lugha. And lugha is extremely important in the Quran, because one of the things about the Arabic language is we have what's called fiqh al-lugha. So you study nahu and sarf, and that's part of it, grammar, and those are coming. But the first and foremost aspect of language is understanding vocabulary. Now, one of the things about language acquisition is we learn language through being in environments where language is spoken. So we learn contextually. Most people don't learn grammar. They learn, we're all speaking with grammar. We can't communicate without grammar, but most people do not learn grammar. They simply learn words in context. When you get into word derivation, when you get into etymologies, you start understanding the depth of language. You get into the subtleties. So, and then the multiple meanings of words. For instance, fact. If you look at fact, most of us think of fact as an established fact. Well, that's the first primary meaning, but it also can mean an allegation. That's why juries judge facts, because you've got two alternate people presenting. You've got these people saying this happened, and then these people saying this happened. They're both presenting facts as allegations. But a fact, in its primary meaning, is something that simply is, right? It's factual. It happened, or like a historical fact. But it also means allegation. So most of us don't think of fact as allegation, but a lawyer does, because they're using it in that way. And so it's only through the study and acquisition of language. So if you look at just in the Quran, some examples. If you look at like Surah Ash-Shura, there's a verse in Surah Ash-Shura. It's one of the most important verses in Creed, right? It's the verse everybody learns. فاطر السماوات والأرض جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا ومن الأنعام أزواجا يذرأكم فيه وهو السميع البصير. So if you look at that verse, that's one verse, right? If you look at the beginning of it, فاطر السماوات والأرض. What's fatir? Ibn Abbas didn't know what that word meant, because it's a very unusual Arabic word. He didn't know what it meant. And he heard two Bedouin arguing about a well. And the Bedouin, he said, Ana fatartu, like I originated it, the well. And he got an understanding of fatir that he hadn't had before. Fatir is the originator, and maybe it's a cognate of father, the Sanskrit for father, Allahu A'lam. But fatir is the originator. So Allah says He's the originator of the heavens and the earth. And then He made you, ja'ala. See, ja'ala is different from khalaqa, even though in the Quran it can mean khalaqa. But ja'ala, because you can have khalaqa and then ja'ala. right? So khalaqa, ja'ala here is he made you, li'anfusikum azwaja. He made for yourselves mates or opposites. The zawj is an opposite. So, zawj is always the opposite. So we have two hands. We have a left hand, right hand. And even though they look the same, they're the opposite, right? And the same for the mate. So you have a zawj, which is the opposite. Zawaj is that's why you can't have a zawaj that's not with opposites in Arabic, linguistically. I mean, if you just look at the word itself, it's the mating of the zawj. So you can't have a zawj who's not your opposite. They have to be your opposite. So then Allah says, وَمِنَ الْأَنْعَامِ أَزْوَاجًا. And then in Surah Yasin, Allah says, سُبْحَانَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْأَزْوَاجَ كُلَّهَا مِمَّا تُنْبِتُ الْأَرْضِ. So He creates azwaj from even now we know the flowers and the tree, everything has opposites, right? And so وَمِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَمِمَّا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, from their own souls and from what they're not even aware of. Like we didn't know in the atomic world there's opposites as well. Everything is opposite, sama wal ard. And the Quran is filled with dyadic opposite. I mean, there's so many, samawati wal ard, right? Jannah wa nar, dunya wa akhirah, right? Hayat al-ula wa hayat al-akhirah. I mean, there's so many in the Quran because the Quran is a book of binaries. So once Allah establishes everything is in binaries, then He says, laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing like Him. In other words, He doesn't have a binary. There's no binary here. Allah is non-binary. He's the only non-binary. So people that are in rebellion against this creation, and Iblis, obviously, I mean, that's something the devil would really have a field day with, right? To make this argument that you're not made like that you make yourself. In other words, you're a God, so you can choose what you want to be. Whereas we're in submission to Allah. Allah made us what we are. We can't change X, Y, or XX. You can't do that. I mean, you can take hormones and change the physical makeup of your body, but you're still, the essence is the essence. Now look, laysa kamithlihi shay. So Allah says there's no mithal like Him, and the ka there is for it's a ziyada. So it doesn't mean there's not a likeness of His likeness, right? It's laysa kamithlihi, laysa mithluhu shay. What is the difference between ka and mithal in the Arabic language? See, ka, if I say Yusuf ka Ahmad, Yusuf is like Ahmad. He might be like Ahmad in his intelligence, but not in any other way. But if I say Yusuf mithlu Ahmad, and that's why the Arab, it means he's just like Ahmad. And this is why the Arabs say mithluhu tamaman, like he's exactly like him. They won't say huwa ka Zayd tamaman. They'll say, even in Ammiya today, they'll say mithluhu tamaman, because the mithal is the essence. There's no essence like God. There's no essence like God. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Those are attributes. So the essence of God is what's laysa kamithlihi shay. As far as the attributes go, the only way we can know God is because He's given us, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. He's created us in His metaphysical image. In other words, we have attributes like hearing and sight. I mean, obviously they're canceled out. They're not like God's hearing or like God's sight. But the only way we can understand that God has hearing and sight is because there's something that there's a tashbih. And this is where you have tanzih and tashbih. Right? So Allah is absolutely, anything that occurs to your mind, Allah is other than that. And yet, and that wow is not atf in the Quran. It's not atf. It means wow al-isti'naf. So it's saying yet, like despite that, laysa kamithlihi shay, yet huwa as-sami' al-basir. Right? Like you can understand that because you are Sami' and you are Basir and you are Mutakallim and you are Hayy, right? You are Mawjood. So you can understand those attributes because وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, in your own selves, don't you see? So لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ كُلُّ مَا خَطَرَ بِبَالِكَ اللَّهُ خِلَافُ ذَلِكَ. Everything that occurs to your mind, Allah is other than that. And that's absolutely true. And any attribute, any number over infinity in mathematics is 0, right? If you have an equation, you have 8 over a sideways 8, which represents infinity. If you have 8 over infinity, there's no 8. There's nothing. So our hearing is canceled out with Allah, because Allah is all hearing, right? Without organ, He doesn't need udhun. He has no jariha. And yet, how do we understand it except through that attribute? So the essence of Allah is unknowable. We can never know Allah's essence, but His attributes are known through His creation. We know what mercy is because the Prophet even used the example of the foal and the mother. Do you think that mother would throw her child into a fire? And then he said Allah's mercy is greater than hers. So he was showing, here's mercy in the world. Now you can't imagine God's mercy, but here's a glimpse of understanding what mercy is.